Facebook has come under fire recently for its role in last year's election. Reports have surfaced showing the social networking site was a breeding ground for misinformation. During the election season, Facebook was paid at least $100,000 by Russian troll farms for advertising. According to Bloomberg, representatives from Facebook will be meeting with the Senate panel on Russia's meddling in last year's election. All this is happening as the company's CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, travels the country on what looks like a political and PR tour. Max Chafkin, writer from Bloomberg Businessweek, joins me now to talk about all this. Max, thanks so much for joining us. So, first of all, fake news, misinformation. What's Zuckerberg doing about that at Facebook?
So, first of all, it's probably important to say that he's been on paternity leave for the past month or so. And so he's sort of been out of the loop. But that said, basically what Facebook's been trying to do is to say that, we did not anticipate these things. We did not anticipate that people would use our platform to buy ads to try to mess with the election, et cetera, et cetera. I think the bigger story here, as far as Zuckerberg is concerned, is that since the election of Donald Trump, he's been on this sort of understanding tour. I think Facebook basically underestimated the role that fake news and bots and that sort of thing would play in the election, that it would even be a factor in 2016. And so starting in January, he went on this kind of slightly strange political excursion where he started doing the sorts of things that you would expect a aspiring presidential candidate to do. He went to a soda fountain in Iowa. He sat in a big rig truck. He went to a fracking rig. Now, Mark Zuckerberg is very young. He'll only be 36 when the 2020 election comes around. But some people, are taking this seriously. And the reason they're taking it seriously is because Facebook just has an enormous amount of power. I think people are just now just getting their heads around just how powerful this company is. It's worth $500 billion. They have more than 2 billion users. So it's probably the most influential media organization, of all time. And Zuckerberg, for all his sort of reputational problems right now, he's well regarded. He has an amazing sort of success story.
And as your article points out, Zuckerberg has hired a lot of people at Facebook that were political operatives. I think most of the ones you named were Democrats. Does he seem interested in politics or running for office?
Well, I think we have to separate those two. Definitely interested in politics. Some of the operatives you're alluding to, I think probably the biggest name is David Plouffe, who was kind of the architect of President Obama's 2008 run.
Yep.
And the thing here is that Facebook, whether or not he runs for political office, Facebook now has to deal with politics basically on both sides of the Atlantic. You have European regulators who are sniffing around the company. Here in the U.S., people on sort of both the extreme right and the extreme left are really mad at Facebook, looking to do something in terms of regulatory crackdown. So he has to be thinking about politics, defensively at a minimum. Now, the other thing is, Facebook itself people think of it as a company. It's kind of like a little nation or a little sort of, empire onto its own. And
they call it an
politics,
ecosystem there.
Yeah, or a community.
Yeah.
I've heard Mark say the Facebook community. But, he is in some ways like a world leader. And that means, making sure that he understands who his constituency is. So I think part of going to Iowa and Nebraska is hey, there are a lot of people in the heartland who use Facebook. Let me understand them. And finally, I do think, look, we're talking about one of the most competitive, most ambitious, most tactical people, around, and he happens to be really rich with 100% name recognition, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure in the back of his mind, he has thought about politics. And so, and he would be well positioned if he wanted to, make a run.
You think?
Yeah, definitely. I think when you what's interesting is you talk to sort of tech people, beat reporters out in Silicon Valley, they think this is just a great big joke. In DC, people take it a little bit more seriously because the truth is that in the 2016 election, a lot of things happened, but in some ways it was a social media election. I mean, it was the Trump campaign, leaving aside the accusations about Russia. The Trump campaign used Facebook very successfully in terms of targeting. The Clinton campaign relied on social media very much. So you're talking about the guy who owns that.
Right.
And as I said, people tend to like Mark Zuckerberg, and that's what makes this this Bob Mueller, the special counsel's investigation potentially so damaging to Facebook. It's not that anyone is saying that Facebook did something wrong. I mean, at worst, maybe they were negligent. They should have been paying more attention. The thing is that it just sort of exposed a lot of the ugliness that is going on Facebook, and that Facebook hasn't done much about. Most people have sort of listened to Mark Zuckerberg and think about how, this is a hopeful platform. It's about seeing pictures of your grandkids. It's about meeting up with your old high school friends or whatever. And that it is all of those things, but it's also the site of a lot of really bad stuff, some ugliness that no one has really reckoned with. So I think there's a lot of brand risk to Facebook. And, advertising week is coming up. I mean, advertisers are certainly going to be looking at this, and there's potential to hurt Facebook's bottom line as well.
You bring up so many issues in this article, including this idea that Facebook was always supposed to be about connecting people. That's what Zuckerberg likes to say, the community. But you point out in your article that some people feel more isolated as a result of social media and Facebook. How does Zuckerberg address this issue?
So he takes it from the other point of view. I mean, his what he says has been one of the big outcomes of these travels has been him thinking about Facebook as a solution to problems of alienation and isolation. So if you go back starting in the 70s, 60s, there's been a decline in membership of churches, in community groups. Basically people are less community oriented than they used to be, 40, 50 years ago. And Mark Zuckerberg sees that as an opportunity for Facebook. Of course, as you say, critics point out that maybe Facebook is causing this. I mean, it doesn't take a very sophisticated analysis to think about what sitting in front of a screen all day, talking to virtual people, like that doesn't necessarily seem like a great way to connect. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, there are lots of stories, and Facebook has been very, good about telling the stories of people, say cancer patients connecting with other, peers and that sort of thing. So, it's kind of a double-edged sword. And what is so devastating about the Russia stuff and about this, there was a story in ProPublica that last week about people buying basically ads with anti-Semitic keywords. What's so devastating about this is it kind of cuts against the story of Facebook as a nice platform, as a way to connect with people who are going through similar experiences.
So there's that Senate panel that wants to talk to Facebook representatives. Will that include Zuckerberg? And what is that panel looking for exactly?
We don't know. I think looking down the road, I think there is a chance that he will end up testifying. What's happening in the Senate? So there's sort of two things going on. One is the Mueller investigation, and then the other is Congress is also looking into sort of the way that Facebook is used to buy ads. And Mark Warner, who is the top Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, has been a big critic of Facebook. When they made this disclosure 2 weeks ago about the $100,000 worth of ads, he said this is just the tip of the iceberg. So what they want to know is how much else is out there. I mean, first of all, how hard did Facebook have to look to find these $100,000 worth of ads, and how hard have they looked for other types of ads? Right. And the truth is, we don't really know. There have been other reports about sort of the possibility that Russian bots were involved in terms of trying to shape perception. There's been some possible manipulation around Facebook events where supposedly maybe people connected to the Kremlin were trying to organize these kind of flash mobs or flash demonstrations.
Right. The tip of the iceberg, as Senator Warner said. Max Chafkin, it's a really interesting article. Thanks so much for sharing your insights with us.
Thanks for having me.